Did you at some point think, okay, the jig is up, we might actually have to call a time of death on this? How easy would it be to get my stuff and go?
The nature of the GNU, you go into it with the full awareness that any day, any time, it may collapse.
Right, welcome to the Pap and Politics podcast. I'm Thabo from 5 Breakfast. They often say personality influences politics, and that's what's kind of inspired this podcast over here. And our first guest today is none other than the Communications Minister, Solly Malatsi. Minister, welcome to the podcast. You're the very first guest, as you may have heard. I hope you're honored.
I'm very honored. It's always a pleasure to be the first one, and I hope that it's a good omen for the future of the podcast.
Let's hope so. I mean, the last time I think I spoke to you a couple of months ago, I think it was 2 months into your job, and I asked you, how's it going? I mean, because this is a huge responsibility. And you said to me, well, things are going okay, but the past few months, a lot has happened. We've watched the news. How are things going? What's the status report?
You're absolutely right. I think when we spoke, it was, a sudden realization that there's a lot of work to do in repositioning the department to be governed well, in making sure that the entities, which are state-owned entities that are under the Department of Communications, are properly staffed with the right board in charge, and that the key management positions are filled, and also focusing on policy priorities. You are right. The last few weeks have been unsettling, particularly with the conversation about the future of the government of national unity. But overall, I would say that the department is stable, and I found my feet in it, identifying where the opportunities are to improve, the performance of the department, and also identified priorities that I want to focus on. Chief amongst those being, enhancing access to internet connectivity, making smart devices affordable for all, because they are an important instrument of communication. 3, around ensuring that we've got stable boards that are ethically led, that deliver quality services, and 4, putting work on ensuring that the policy regulatory environment that we function in is stable and can provide the level of certainty that our industry players and the sector need. 1, to make long-term commitments on investments, and 2, to just provide the sector with an assurance that the most pertinent issues in the sector are being dealt with, and being dealt with robustly so.
I mean, I have to say that, as far as roles go, you're in your element, because you've got this very lengthy, kind of career. I mean, I kind of had to do my research. I mean, when I was in grade 9, and I don't mean to make you feel old, I really don't. You're not that much older than I am. But when I was in grade 9, you were the spokesperson in the Western Cape government. So this is right up your alley, So I can't say the same for some of your colleagues, but, you're settling in quite well, I suppose. Let's talk about the SABC. That's kind of the elephant in the room, right? When I talk about what's been in the news, you had to withdraw the bill. What exactly do you take issue with as far as the SABC bill is concerned? Because that didn't sit very well with some of your colleagues on the committee.
Well, yes. So the SABC bill in the current version, I think there is widespread recognition that it has some serious flaws. Chief amongst those, the lack of a funding model for the SABC, which is partly the reason it was developed, to establish a funding model, because the future of funding of the SABC is a very difficult question to answer. And secondly, there are aspects of the current version of the bill that, in my view, give unhealthy powers to the minister around appointments of members of the commercial board, around the editorial independence of the entity. And if you look at the number of submissions that were made publicly, the overwhelming majority of those submissions said that the bill in its current form ought to be withdrawn, so that you address the flaws that are in it. And I think 17 of those submissions indicated that way. And there was one submission basically which felt that the issues with the bill can be resolved through the portfolio committee process. I then took the decision to withdraw the bill from Parliament, empowered by Rule 344 of the National Assembly rules, which explicitly states that a minister who introduces a bill may write to the Speaker of the National Assembly to request that the bill be withdrawn before a second reading of the bill. So let's look at the process. Has the bill been read a second time? No, which means that the qualification to withdraw it is still applicable. Am I the Minister of Communications? Yes, so that is still applicable. There are people who felt that, and it's people who are opposed to withdrawal of the bill, that claim that the only way to withdraw that bill is through a cabinet decision. And the interesting thing is, nowhere in any legislation or rules will you find that codified, right? It is merely convention that is based on the fact that one party and one party alone has been the majority party in government for the longest of time, so it has reproduced its own institutional practices into the architecture of government. But this whole withdrawal of the bill is not about a vanity project or anything. But rather to say that we acted within the law, and I'm still convinced that we were right within the law, and that any additional structures to be followed in terms of that withdrawal of the bill is simply for the interest of relationship management rather than compliance with the law.
I mean, I must say, we're talking about, you not being very popular, I guess, with certain members of the Communications Committee, which you report to, right?
Yeah, we are accountable to. Yeah.
You're accountable to them. Excuse me. You seem like a very laid-back, kind of simple guy, if you don't mind me saying. How do you deal with conflict? Because I think of politics, especially in a South African context, as this is a little dramatic, but this is the perfect analogy. It's like an episode of Real Housewives. I don't know if you've seen Real Housewives.
Some episodes, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of catfights, a lot of very, very unnecessary, a lot of name-calling, mudslinging. How does somebody like you, who relatively is kind of unproblematic, how do you deal with all the back and forth and a lot of the vitriol that comes your way sometimes?
I think if you told the portfolio committee that I'm unproblematic, they'll have a different view.
Oh, no, sorry, they hate you.
No, I don't think it's hate. I'm never one to dwell on, people's emotive energy towards me. I think it's neither here and there. My focus is on, do I believe the right decisions that I'm taking, and do I believe in them? And so be it. In politics, conflict is inevitable. If you want to avoid conflict, then don't be in politics.
Yeah.
At all, because the fear to get into conflict will mean that you are swallowed by nothingness. Because you can't move. I just think that there's also an exuberance on the part of the committee that seeks to counter every ministerial effort to assert its authority. I've got a very good relationship with the committee. It's robust. We are not here in the business of giving each other flowers every day. We demand tough answers, from each other based on the tough questions that we ask. So and that tension must exist. I think in order to have a robust and a healthy parliamentary process, you need the executive and the legislative arm to have a robust relationship. It doesn't mean that it must be permanently conflictual. So a lot of the opposition to the bill, in my view, is informed by the discomfort people have with the withdrawal of a bill, rather than I would say my personality and my style. Because remember, we are in an adjustment phase for a lot of people who used to govern by themselves and who used to do things one way and one way only, which is the conventional way that they have done, and we are looking at things differently through a different lens, and it will make some people uneasy, and that's just the way of it.
Fair enough. And I must say, as a young politician, I think about I've always wondered what would inspire or prompt somebody to go into politics. I mean, I say you're young, so you weren't exactly dodging rubber bullets back in the day. I mean, what would a 16-year-old Solly Malatsi, would they be proud of what you've done and maybe not be shocked because, okay, this seemed like something you were going to do as politics? Because politics doesn't come across as something very enticing to a 16-year-old, or like young people. But how do you decide something like that?
Well, I think it starts with, what you frame politics to be. To you and what it means. I think a 16-year-old me would not be surprised of the work that I'm doing now, even though at the time I wasn't actively involved in politics, but I was involved in public service. I was always involved in things that were either standing up against injustice or helping people, get access to what is rightfully theirs. At that low scale, that is considered politics. If you are asking and fighting for people not to be expelled from school simply because they've been absent for a certain number of days, or they can't afford a particular set of school uniform, but you are pleading for their case to attend school, so it all comes down to how you define politics is. I think what has kept my flame alive in terms of public service and what you consider politics has been, a determination to work against all injustices in their way. So in my pursuit of justice, it will then deal with involvement in politics and actively joining the DA and then participating in the structures of the party and ultimately being elected to public office.
One thing that I think the May elections exposed was just how despondent the youth are. They're not very active, not really interested. I mean, putting aside the politics of it all, but just what happens in their world. And politics, whether you like it or not, shapes our environment and how we perceive certain things. But why do you think young people, to a certain extent, just aren't interested? And because I feel like somebody like you, who's young, you've got the voice. I'm sure you're familiar with the lingo. You can relate to them. But why do you think that they're not so conscious politically or about what's happening in the country?
Look, I don't think it's being less conscious. I think, the youth and many other sections of society have reluctantly given up on politics as a way of shaping and positively influencing society, right? And that frustration manifests in voter apathy, because people have been so disappointed by one party in particular that they start painting everyone with the same brush, reluctant to vote differently in some parts because they've been exposed to voting to one government. And I think ultimately some parts of the youth ask themselves, what's in it for me? Why should I be politically active and vote if I'm unemployed? My parents still depend on social grant. There are no roads in my area. There are no street lights. There's no water, and that could be a sentiment, and a sense of disappointment with those that they have previously elected. So we've got a responsibility, whether we are in government or not, to be able to showcase what the power of individual contribution is in fighting against a political system that may impose incompetence on the will of society. And ultimately, in my view, there's nothing worse than not being involved in politics, like being led by people who are inferior to you morally, ethically, perhaps even intellectually.
And, we've just come from a period of, I think some people might say uncertainty, because let's be honest, we weren't sure if there was going to be a continuation of the GNU in its current form. You're obviously privy to certain things. Did you at any point, and this might come across as very, very silly, but you've been deployed as a result of the GNU. Did you at some point think, okay, the jig is up, we might actually have to call a time of death on this? Or did you something as silly as looking at your office and thinking, okay, how easy would it be to get my stuff and go? Because things were, because of how things were looking, you had all these statements coming from different parties and it just it didn't look good.
No, absolutely. I think the nature of the GNU is that you go into it with the full awareness that any day, any time, it may collapse. And by collapse, means that you won't choose what makes it to collapse, but simply that risk is permanent. Whether we've gotten over the budget issues or not, the fact of the matter is that it is not a permanent. It's not a permanent structure that can exist without risks that threaten its future. So I think we are always ready for anything into it. But I think the past 2 weeks around the budget uncertainty, the uncertainty is heightened, and we, I don't think you would have thought about, adding more plants to the office or photos during that period of uncertainty. And the reality is political staff in the office, know what they sign up for in terms of even in the GNU, there can be a reshuffle, and a reshuffle just takes, a call from the president and the leader of the party to then say, we think Thabo must move there, and then, those things are realities that we live with. You have to work in those, because if you focus on them, you'll never do anything.
That is true.
You'll never do anything, right? So for as long as you are there, even if you are left with the last hour, save that and save it to the best of your ability, because you've got not only a constitutional obligation to do so, but a moral obligation to do your work and do it well.
That's a very honest answer. Because I was going to ask you if you think you're going to, I guess, see, if you think you're going to be minister until the end of the GNU period, whenever that is. I think 2029. But I guess that answers it. Nobody's really safe, I suppose.
Nobody knows that answer.
It's a very volatile space to be in. It's very, very volatile. When you look at what's transpired so far, has there been a lesson in it for you as a politician, as a human being? I always say we always want to ask certain questions to politicians, because outside of the press statements, outside of whatever it is, at the end of the day, you're a human being, and these are kind of experiences. They teach you certain things. Did this teach you anything?
What, the uncertainty of the GNU or being in the GNU?
Yes, being in the GNU, because obviously politics is all about political differences. You had to put all of that aside and smile in a cabinet photo with people that you fundamentally disagree with on everything. But surely there are lessons in that.
Yeah, and I think some of those lessons have just been underscored by being part of the GNU. It would have been lessons that existed before. Listen, in politics, in order to have impact, you don't need to be friends with everyone, right? You have to work towards a common vision. And once you've agreed on a common vision, in this case the GNU, it means that you must, whatever size of an ego you have, let go of that, as uncomfortable as it may often get, to focus on the job at hand. It also means, because we work with people from different political orientation, different backgrounds, it means making time to constantly speak to people, bring them along the journey so that there is no mistrust. There'll still be mistrust, because humans and also politicians are very opportunistic and naughty, and can even where sincerity is expressed, be paranoid, right? About why why is there this level of consultation, but the nature of the GNU requires that there is permanent conversation between the two parties, and not only conversations around solving problems, but how we strengthen our interrelationship, so that we don't have a repetition of the budget episode. I think it will be an unfortunate occurrence if in future we have events leading up to the budget adoption that are contaminated by the kind of delays, uncertainty, and the name calling that took place this time around.
And to be fair, we'd never had anything like this before. This is, and it's all as a result of the GNU. So it's, I guess, to be expected. I must say one thing that's interesting about your department, okay, is the fact that you're the communications minister and your deputy was Mondli Gumawela, who was the communications minister. How's that relationship? Because, you talk about ego, but if my ego was the size of China, I wouldn't be happy being demoted and working under somebody else. How's that relationship? I hope you're getting my question.
No, I get your question.
Yeah.
It's professionally functional.
Okay, that's good.
It's professionally functional. I think there's a recognition that we both have different sets of responsibilities, and we have to constantly find ways of making our relationship work. It requires an extraordinary amount of time dedicated towards each other and understanding each other and carrying each other to work, and that is an ongoing thing. It doesn't mean, and it doesn't have to be that you agree all the time, because that would be far too idealistic in politics. But it means that for as long as there is respect towards each other and each other's roles, there is open and frank communication, then the professional obligations of the relationship can be met to the minimum that it makes it functional, and that's what matters.
One of the reasons I thought bringing you here was so fitting is because obviously, you're kind of the government shareholder for the SABC, and I asked you about the SABC bill earlier.
It may seem to be abuse of power also, because I'm the very first guest at your relaunch of the podcast, but it's appropriate that perhaps.
No, but I will say you're probably one of the most accessible ministers I've ever met, because everybody else is, I'm too busy, or I'm too this, or they don't even answer their phone. So I really appreciate the fact that you answered your phone, and I appreciate that, I really do. But as far as the SABC, this is a monster of a machine, and having to turn things around and fix is a huge responsibility. Many have tried and they failed. Fundamentally, what are you looking to do to change what's happening here at the SABC?
Yeah, so our role as a shareholder is to guide the board and to conduct the oversight, so that the governance matters are well taken care of, that there is accountability, and that government resources are used very wisely. So given the pressures, particularly the financial pressures that the SABC is, and those pressures are applicable to all public broadcasters in the universe, the most important thing for me is for the SABC to be financially sustainable and have sources of revenue that would empower it not to holistically rely on government largely for funding, because the source of government funding is going to be smaller and smaller going down the years. And this administration, including myself, have no appetite whatsoever for bailout to state-owned entities, because that takes money that you could be dedicating for far more pressing social needs into state-owned enterprises, and that can be business as usual.
Okay, now we're gonna wind things down just a little bit. I know that are you a runner or a cycler? I'm sorry, because I think we're Facebook friends. I used to see pictures of you just donning bike shorts, and were you a runner or a...
No, nothing to do with the bike. Yeah.
Were you a runner?
I used to be a runner.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
So
I'm in a recovering phase now. Yeah.
So you're not doing that anymore?
No, so there are levels to being a runner, right? So
you do these marathons?
Yeah. So in my current state, I'm not the runner I used to be.
Okay, well, you've got a lot of things to do.
But yeah, I'm still passionate about running. I still try and sneak in, a run or two weekly. But yeah, I think it's just reigniting that love for running again that I'm in the process of reigniting.
Wow. Okay. I just started walking. I got this thing. It's a lot of work. I don't know how people do it. I really don't. But so, what's the fastest you've ever run? What's your? Because I know it's a thing, right? It's a whole flex. Oh, I run 50 Ks. I ran 300 Ks. I've never really understood that. Is that
Once
something
you
you
are
wear?
into races, look, for me, running is about enjoyment and fulfillment. So I don't focus a lot in terms of speed and times, particularly lately. But yeah, I mean, the furthest I've ran, which is what I think you were asking,
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
is running from Soweto to Tzaneen.
What?
Yeah, running from Soweto to Tzaneen, 523 kilometers over 14 days, averaging 37 to 39 kilometers a day. I did it with a friend of mine, Mahashule Ghana, and we were doing so to raise funds for underprivileged learners in Limpopo to get school uniform and sanitary pads for them.
500 kilometers and you ran all the way.
523. Look, we it was over 14 days, right?
Okay,
so on average, we're doing 37 to 39 kilometers a day. But in terms of the longest distance I've ran on a day was 89 kilometers for Comrades Marathon. I've done 3 of those.
That's very impressive, I have to say. It's very impressive. But you mentioned Mahashule Ghana. He's now Action SA, wasn't he? Or he left?
He's with Rise Mzansi.
Rise, okay, okay. So you're friends with people who've left the DA?
Okay. Mahashule Ghana and I met in the DA many years ago. I think it was around 2007. And interestingly, we had been students at the University of Limpopo at the same time, but didn't know each other. But it was for 1 year because he's a year or two older than me. So he was academically ahead of me, but we didn't know each other then. I met him in Joburg for the first time in 2007 when I was studying at Wits, and I think he was already working here in Joburg. We became friends, and we've been friends ever since then.
I mean, they do say that politicians are actually... somebody said this, I'm trying to remember who it was, that... well, in your situation, your values are kind of politically, you're more or less on the same wavelength. Subtle disagreements, I'm assuming, but surely, you're still friends. But I've heard that, politicians, outside of all the theatrics of, chants in Parliament, I know that's like a 10-year-old reference, but like outside of things like that, politicians generally get along. They're actually very, very good friends. I know Julius was at Fikile Mbalula's wedding, for example, and people I feel like the general public don't understand that outside of it, you're all human beings and with certain interests. And when you get to Parliament, whatever, this is your job, and you're representing your party, and you're going to do follow party lines or whatever. But so you've managed to like maintain these friendships with people outside, even who've left the DA.
I think there's a dramatization of the differences that politicians have, because that plays itself out in or through spectacles in the media, because those are publicized, right?
Yeah.
And the public never gets to see the behind the scenes engagements when politicians agree with each other. And I don't think when you see the differences, it's a performance or a less genuine expression of what people are feeling at the time or expressing at the time. But politics means that you talk to your opponents on a continuous basis, and that's what solidifies those relationships.
Okay. Now, as we wrap up, I want to ask you something. We're a music station, okay, and I thought about doing this. I don't know how good this is going to come across, okay, but I took a couple of pictures of famous people.
Okay.
I'm just testing your knowledge here a little bit.
I hope it's not pop culture, because...
Oh, it is pop culture.
Well,
I promise you know some of these people. Who's this?
Taylor Swift or Miley Cyrus?
Oh, there you go. Okay, there you go. It's Taylor Swift.
Okay.
It's Taylor Swift. I got somebody else. Hold on. Again, who's this?
Damn. She's South African, right?
Yes. She's South African.
She's South African. She has a song. Is it Water?
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
She's good. I forget her name.
I should give it to you. It's Tyler.
Yeah, Tyler. Yeah,
Okay. This. Do you know?
Just give me a moment. It's probably two. Is she a rapper?
Yes.
Okay.
She's a rapper.
If she's a rapper, it's gonna come down to two people. There's a rapper with a South African dad.
That's the other one.
Okay, so that's not
yeah,
that
but they're more or less on the same.
Okay,
yeah, you're there.
But let's eliminate that. What's her name?
That's Doja Cat.
That's not Doja Cat.
No, that's not.
That will. I think she has Megan the Stallion.
Well, that's good.
Yeah,
okay,
I
that
think
is
that's
Megan
Megan
Thee
Thee
Stallion.
Stallion.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then this one. Maybe this is not helping very. Yeah, but yeah. I feel like you would know this. You
Kelly
would know.
Khumalo?
No. She's a rapper.
Oh, she's a rapper.
Yeah.
Oh my God. South African.
Yeah, South African.
Another clue.
Okay. I'm not sure. Okay, her boyfriend's also a rapper.
Her boyfriend's a
And
rapper.
he like interrupted her.
Okay.
Okay, good.
The
Okay.
rapper must be risen.
There you go. Good.
Gigi Lamay.
There you go.
Yes,
Wow,
Gigi
this
Lamay.
is amazing.
Yeah, Gigi
This is
Lamay.
great.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Gigi Lamay.
Thank you so much, Minister. We genuinely, this has been such a treat.
you.
Thank you. I hope you like managed to like get, let your hair down a little bit. I know everybody sometimes you always have to be a little stiff and stiff upper lip and serious, but that's what the podcast is about.
Yeah.
It's about getting to know our politicians, our newsmakers, and finding out what makes them tick, what makes them laugh, what makes them cry, and I hope you were comfortable enough, to let your guard down with us. We really appreciate it.
No, absolutely enjoyed it, and all the best for the future of the podcast.
Thank you. I hope. Just tell your colleagues to answer their phones. They really aren't. I don't know why.
Well, if you struggle with my immediate colleagues, I will help. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cheers.